joining us on our first live stream interview with Unschooling Mom2Mom. I've done some like chatty things before, but never bringing somebody else on. So Jeremy Stuart, welcome.
Hi, Sue. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. I really appreciate it. It's great.
Sure. Well, Jeremy is a filmmaker. You guys know, I'm sure. He's an unschooling dad, and his latest film is Self-Taught. But you probably know him from Class Dismissed, because Class Dismissed is what we always say, watch it, watch it, watch it. Because it's so fabulous. You know, it takes a family that wasn't happy in the school district, and through a variety of try this, try that, try this, try that, and then they ended up with unschooling in the end and really happy. So for families that are wondering, oh my gosh, I don't know, we still say class dismissed, class dismissed. But now Jeremy has this new documentary where he studied 6, followed along in depth this time. Well, it was in depth with the one family before, but in depth with 6 different unschoolers and what their paths look like. And it's so fascinating. So I think you're going to love it. I think if you guys could still go ahead and when you come on, if you could let us know you're here so that I can be sure this is working. Jeremy, tell us a little bit about your family and your step into unschooling and how this has been for you guys.
Sure, yeah. So our daughter is 15, almost 15. She likes to say she's 15, but she's not.
Right. Oh, yeah. She's probably been saying it for a while.
Exactly. And she's been unschooled her whole life, so she's never gone to any kind of school at all. And it's worked out really well for us. We really love this lifestyle, and we love the freedom and flexibility of it. And you know, I would say that she's really flourishing. And for us as a family, it's just a really great arrangement. So, you know, we started out right when she was really little, looking at what we were going to do for schooling. And we went to the HSC conference in California and, you know, check it all out and everything. And we were just so blown away by the kids that we met there, of all ages. They were just so you know, confident and sure of themselves, and were able to talk to adults. And we were like, wow, these kids are amazing. So, you know, that was a sort of introduction to the idea of homeschooling. And then, of course, we just sort of fell into the unschooling thing. We didn't actually really try any curriculum at any point. I mean, well, I back up a little bit. We did try at one point. We bought some math textbooks.
Isn't it always math?
It's always math, right?
Oh my gosh.
And that was a total disaster. So we abandoned that whole idea. So we're like, forget the whole textbook thing. So let's just live life, enjoy life, and, you know, have fun adventures together and do whatever seems to be coming up right now in terms of the passions of our daughter and our interests, and support her in every way that we can. And that's kind of what we've done, and it's been great. We love it. So that's a little bit about, you know, our life and what works for us.
Awesome. That's awesome. Let's see if there's, so if you have questions for Jeremy, feel free to go ahead and write them in, and we'll try to, we'll just plug them in wherever we get them. Because we're really, I have a couple of really basic questions for him about the movie and about, you know, life, the meaning of life. And, but we want to be able to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. So right now, in case some of you have only just heard about it, or maybe you've just now heard about it, Jeremy has the trailer that we're going to try to run right here in the middle of the live video so that you can see a little bit about what it's about. So, Jeremy?
Yeah, you want to give that a try?
Go
okay,
ahead
here you
and
go.
try it.
I'm going to go ahead and switch gears here.
Right.
Can you see that big black screen?
I do.
Here we go.
I think we should move you a little over. Well, maybe that's me. Never mind.
The way I learn the best is just by doing. And I like my own space, and I like my own time, and I like to choose how that time is spent. And school is none of those things. The only way to find out what makes you feel alive is to spend time experimenting. And most young people don't get that chance to experiment.
no matter how much we drive the formal schools, most of what we know is meaningful to us comes from self-directed education.
The whole normal path people take, I can't imagine myself being on that path. I'm very self-directed, and when I want things, I really want them. And there is some merit to being able to dive deeply into one specific thing and just get really good at it.
I hated school. I guess you'd say I was a third grade dropout. So I essentially started doing my own thing. I guess that's what I did for the next 10 years.
We don't, as a culture, trust teenagers or children. I'm pretty sure that if we leave them to their own devices, they will make rotten decisions. Could we just let them be, see what they do, and be curious what people do with freedom?
I've always been fascinated with the idea of being my own boss and being in charge of my own schedule, because being raised as an unschooler, I didn't like to be told when I needed to be somewhere, how I needed to do something.
It's just a sense of freedom, a sense of not feeling like I'm working towards somebody else's ideal perception of what I should be doing.
The idea is to question the wisdom you've received from friends, family, from society, and then to make up your own mind, to really be an independent thinker, to know who you are and what you want to do.
I think that self-directed education has the chance of allowing us to come to what is our real self-interest.
I think an education is the capacity to author your own life instead of merely accepting the one that you've been.
All right.
All right, did that work out?
Okay. I'm out of exit full screen here. And okay, there was a question someone asked, will this be available afterwards? And yeah, it will. We'll just keep it here. And not only will we have it here on Facebook, but I'm recording it, so we'll have a backup. All right. So would you tell me what made you go from doing class dismissed? Well, what motivated you first to do these kinds of documentaries?
Well, when I made Class Dismissed, I was, fairly new to the whole idea of unschooling and homeschooling, and I was looking around, reading books and trying to get information on how, what are we supposed to do? How does this work? And there's lots of fantastic books out there. But then I started, because I'm a filmmaker that's my profession, I'm an editor. And I started looking around to see if there were any films about homeschooling or unschooling, and I really couldn't find anything. There were some short little things on YouTube that people have done, but there was nothing that was sort of full length. And I thought, wow, what an interesting idea. It would be really cool to do a film about homeschooling. And so that's how Class Dismissed began.
Uh-huh.
And little did I know, as I sort of got the idea with my friend Roy, that it was going to take nearly 5 years to make it. But anyway, it's gone on to far exceed my expectations. I'm just absolutely thrilled at the response that the film got all over the world, and the most important thing for me is that it's made a difference in people's lives. I really honestly get emails still from people saying they saw Class Dismissed and they were thinking about homeschooling, and then they saw the film and then they took a leap, and it's working out for them. And so that's been great. So that was the sort of original idea, was to just simply jump in and try to do a film about homeschooling to help other families navigate that. Mm-hmm. And then, as you know, I traveled around the US and in other countries doing screenings of that film and doing live Q&As in movie theaters primarily, and other places as well. And one of the questions that kept coming up over and over and over again was, well, this homeschooling thing is great when they're little, but what happens when they become adults? Like, if they've never been to school, how are they going to get a job? Or how are they going to go to college if they've not got any grades, or they haven't gone through the traditional, hoops that you go through to get to college? How's that possible? And these are really good questions, of course, and I didn't really address those specifically in Class Dismissed. I mean, I touched upon it a little bit, but I started thinking, wow, this question keeps coming up. It was literally almost every screening.
Yes, it does come up a lot.
People would ask that question. Well, it all sounds great, but what about, how do they turn out?
Right.
How do they turn out as adults? And the other question was, how will they ever be successful? And I started to think about, well, what does being successful mean in our culture? I think our culture defines success very narrowly. It's usually something like, go to school, get good grades, go to university, get a degree, get a high-paying job,
Right.
work for the rest of your life, and you're successful. And I think that's an incredibly narrow definition of what success means.
Mm-hmm.
So that question, will they be successful, combined with how do they turn out as adults, was the kind of impetus that drove me to make this new film. And I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating to track down a group of adult unschoolers? And I wanted to specifically focus on unschooling rather than traditional curriculum-based homeschooling, and to find out, a little bit about their lives, like what their feeling was about being unschooled, how it sort of affected who they are now, and just get their thoughts about it and see what they were doing now, and also to ask them the question of, what does success mean to them? How do they define success for themselves? So that's kind of, that was the impetus of the film, and yeah, I accomplished that.
I think you did. How did you find these people?
Well, I reached out through the networks of people that I'd met through Class Dismissed. My homeschooling groups I knew of, homeschooling groups. I reached out directly to Peter Gray and Gina Riley, who had done they did
Study.
a survey, a study
Mm-hmm.
a number of years ago on grown unschoolers, and I also talked to you as well, Sue. So thank you.
You're welcome. We love Jared.
Yes, Jared, thank you, came through you directly. So, so that's sort of how I found people. And, I got, again, a lot of responses from all over the place. And, I would call them and talk to them and try to get a little bit of their story, just sort of background over the phone, and then figure out if there was if the story was really interesting. I mean, everybody's story was interesting.
Of course.
But, I had to sort of try to sort of pick some diversity.
You only have so many minutes.
Exactly. There's only so much you can fit in one film. So I was sort of looking at it going, well, that's a really interesting story. And I wanted to try to get some diversity in terms of types of work, so an artist, a scientist,
Right.
So, try to get some good variety there in terms of what they're doing. So anyway, it was quite a process. And again, it took a while. I spent 2.5 years on this film, so very little time actually compared to Class.
Each time you get faster and faster, cutting it in half.
Exactly. The next one will be a couple of months.
You're just going to be churning them out.
No, I don't know about that. But anyway, so that's how I kind of located the various people in the film. And then I was particularly interested in what North Star was doing with Ken Danford, because I started really thinking about this whole process of this transition from being a teenager into being an adult. It's an incredibly important transition in a young person's life.
Mm-hmm.
And again, culturally, there's so much pressure put on teens who are in school to, get on the right path and get to the best college and get to the university and get all in debt and all of this other stuff, and intense pressure. And so I was really fascinated when I'd met Ken Danford before at an Aero conference a few years back, and he was sharing some of what they were doing at North Star, and I was really intrigued by this. So even though it's not particularly sort of an unschooly thing, but they have a very loose kind of inflow, outflow type of thing where students can come and go.
It's near you, right? Isn't it?
No, it's not. It's actually it's near Boston. Yeah.
I think it was in San Francisco. Okay.
No, it's in Massachusetts. So that's okay. So I really felt that was an important part of the story too, to include, because again, it really deals very directly with that transitional period from being a teenager into becoming, an adult in the working world and getting a job or becoming an entrepreneur, things like that. So, that's why I have a section about North Star in the film as well.
Right. Because I think a lot of unschoolers, that's cool to go to. But I think that a lot of unschoolers start doing some of those adult things as teenagers while their parents are still there kind of as a safety net. And then they keep moving, and then they take on more responsibilities, and then it becomes kind of more of an organic transition. for some
Absolutely.
families.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in fact, I think there's a quote in the film that says just that
Uh,
a lot of unschoolers actually do these, sort of, or kind of make that transition into sort of the adult realm much earlier than their peers who might be in school. Because in
right,
school they have no choice, they have no opportunity to interact with the world. They don't a lot of
right,
these kids don't know how to balance a checkbook or
right.
go to the post
Well,
office.
they're waiting for the
Right,
magic age of 18,
yeah,
when
right,
suddenly their life opens up and they can
right.
have their own choices, only
That's
they have never had any practice at
exactly, which is a huge missing link, I think, in that transition. It's kind of sad that suddenly you're supposed to be an adult and you've had no practice or training in how does the world work outside
it.
of a
Right,
school
right,
environment, right? So,
yeah. Okay, so let's see. Oh, good. Somebody's put the uh, websites up there because there was someone asking, Piper was asking, how do we find class dismissed? How do we find self-taught?
oh,
And
great,
so they're both there. So
thank
you
you.
guys want to be sure to check that out. So they can order it, or are there screenings still, or what are we doing?
So for self-taught, yeah. So self-taught's available right now on DVD, and you can also rent it as a digital rental or download it as a digital download. So it's available right now. You can just go to the selftaughtmovie.com website. And
Okay,
Class Dismissed, of course, has been available for a while. It's also on Amazon and other
right.
places. So those are both available. But in terms of screening, now this is an interesting one because I've been getting this question a lot now.
Well, you did
So
that so much with Class Dismissed.
I know.
I imagine you wore yourself out, but
I did. So yeah, I want to address that question because Class Dismissed, as you know, I traveled. Dustin and I, my co-producer on that film,
yeah,
traveled all over the country doing theater screenings. We were renting movie theaters
it
essentially.
was lovely to have
And
you come to Texas.
it was an absolutely amazing
Yeah.
experience. And, we sold out almost every
Oh,
show. It was just crazy, but it was an absolutely massive amount of work, completely exhausting. Really took us away from our families for long periods of time.
yeah.
And as this new film was coming to a completion, I was talking with my wife Kim, and she was like, "You're not going to go all over the world." And I'm like,
Phase 2 isn't happening, is it?
"You're not thinking of doing that again, are you?" And I was like, "Probably not. No, I just don't think I can pull it off."
I don't.
So that's not really going to happen. However, I'm completely open to doing some screenings if I can be there in person. And one thing that we did with Class Dismissed, which I want to do also with this film, is encourage groups, homeschooling and unschooling groups, to host their own screenings. And there's
Right.
information on the website on how to do that. You can purchase a screener pack, and you get a license to screen the film, and then you can kind of screen it and invite people and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that worked really well for Class Dismissed, and I want to do that again with this film too.
Yeah.
Any chance?
Yeah, I remember Michelle Conaway did that down
Yeah,
at
that's
the
right.
Texas Unschoolers Conference, and they had a screening there.
Yeah, and it was really fantastic because it's a great way for people to bring their own communities together around the film and have discussions afterwards. And,
Right.
and it was really helpful because it also helped get the film out in a wider way. It would never have done what it's done without that support. So that's kind of how I want to play it this time. And as I said, if there are screenings, if people are hosting a screening that happens to be in a location that I may be able to get to and I'm available, I'll be happy to try to come.
You have some relatives, and maybe bring
Exactly.
the whole family.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
Oh, your daughter's so busy though with her
Yeah.
music. Beautiful voice,
Thank
beautiful,
you.
beautiful talent. Okay, well that's good to know that we could do a screening somewhere.
So are there questions coming in? Are people posting
So,
questions?
well, there was one question that showed up yesterday about Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so let me see, where's my little list here? I thought I had it. Of each of the kids, they're not kids.
Well, yeah.
I say that about anybody under 40. So I thought I printed it, but it looks like I did it. So let me pull it up, and each of the that's not what I want.
Interviewees, yeah.
Yeah, your interviewees were lovely. And So Emily was a model. I didn't get it that she was a model at first. I just thought, man, she's
Right.
a beautiful mechanic. and,
Yeah.
and she's a model and also an automotive mechanic. Jared is a filmmaker. Ty is a scientist. Rose is an artist. Hannah is a dog trainer. And Muriel is a world schooler and adventurer. So I was really fascinated by the selection because oftentimes it seems, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems we have a leaning towards the arts.
Yes.
And I think that Peter Gray found that in his stuff. I found that in my book.
Right.
And I don't know whether that's what happens when people allow their creativity to flow, that then they get to try things out. But what I really loved was I loved Ty's story. I loved that he was origami, right? I loved that he was doing this. Okay, for those of you that haven't seen it, each of these people show a little bit about what their life had been like. They talk about it, and then they talk about the career that they moved into. And what I absolutely loved about Ty was he was like obsessed with origami. You know, we try not to say that word obsessed in our community because it has such a negative connotation, but he loved origami. He was doing origami. He was making money at origami. He was setting up stuff with origami. And that's the kind of thing that families would say, yeah, what are you going to do with that?
Right.
Yeah.
Are you going to make a living doing origami?
Because it's not origami, it's drawing, or it's Minecraft, or it's whatever else, right? That's what people see as an unlikely thing to unlikely basket to put your eggs in.
Right.
And what he was able to show us was how he could transition, you know, how diving into that and the detail of it, he turned into a chemist. He fell in love with chemistry, right?
Right.
And so tell us a little bit more about him. I think that's really interesting. And a lot of people think, how will they handle these hard subjects?
I was really impressed and amazed with his story when he first contacted me and said he was interested, and we talked over the phone, and I was blown away. And what I loved is, as you just said, you know, this idea of, well, this origami, it's sort of, well, what are you going to do with origami, really? I mean, how are you going to?
Right.
But what that did for him was it opened up and showed himself what his own mind was capable of doing. He understood that he had a very analytical mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, his mother and sister are both artists and not scientific at all in any sense. Very, very, you know, they're painters, I believe. So for him, it was like this origami was sort of a creative thing, an artistic thing. But then it led to the fact that he discovered he had a very analytical mind, and it led to his interest in biology, and then into chemistry, and then of course, you know, he was able to go on and really, really throw himself very deeply into that, and he's doing some absolutely amazing stuff now.
I loved how he said that biology was too wishy-washy. That he really wanted that right answer, wrong answer kind of thing.
Incredibly analytitle. I mean, and the origami led him into programming, like computer programming, you know, and so it's sort of one thing led to another, which is very interesting, which is why I titled that segment Chain Reactions.
Oh, yeah, that's so good.
Because, you know, I really believe...
I feel like I want to go back and watch the whole thing again, now that I can, like, okay, now it's all going to process a little.
Right, because, you know, I personally really believe that, you know, because we hear that all the time in the unschooling world. It's like, well, they're interested in this, but where's that going to go? Well, and is that, you know, I hear this criticism of, like, well, that's a waste of time.
Right.
And it's like, well, actually, I don't think anything that you learn is a waste of time, because one thing builds upon another, and one doorway opens a doorway to somewhere else. And whether you abandon your interest in something and move into something completely different, it doesn't really matter, because you may not have moved into that something completely different had you not done the first thing. So
not to mention the practice of diving into something and loving it and exploring it. You can then take that process and do any other activity.
Right. So, and it is, it is a process of chain reactions. One thing leads us to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And before long, we're doing something that we never imagined we would be doing, but we got there through this series of events. So that's, I thought his story was a really good illustration of that. And so that's why I wanted to include him. But we sort of took a little tangent.
Oh, we will. But let me say one more thing. We'll get to her. But I want to start with him. Let me also say one other thing about his situation, because I didn't realize that his parents were artists. And so often people are worried that the mom or the dad isn't mathy enough or isn't sciencey, isn't whatever, that they have a particular interest and that's what they really know. And they're afraid that then that's going to limit their child's interests.
Right.
But when you're unschooling, you get this opportunity to see who you really are and get to grow it. And it doesn't have to be a knockoff of your mom or of your dad. You get to have your own path. And that's the point.
Be your own person, right.
Right. Author your own life, right?
Your own life.
There we go. Okay. So, Rose, the question has come up.
Yeah.
Rose was raised in a big family, 8 kids, artist's home, lots of art, not a lot of academics, really.
Yeah.
And she's not super happy with her childhood experience of unschooling. And so the question is, when you're only showcasing 6, why are you showcasing one that wasn't that happy? Yeah,
it's a very good question. And interestingly enough, in the couple of screenings that I've done so far of the film, her story I've had several comments about her story being that people really resonated with it in some way, which is very interesting. So yeah, when she first called me, I was really fascinated with her story, and she made it really clear that she had very mixed feelings.
Yeah. Oh, you can tell in there. One minute she's this, and then she's maybe.
Yeah, and so on some level, she said she wouldn't change anything. She had a lot of freedom, and she loved being able to just follow her interests and so on. But on the other hand, her life was kind of very sheltered in a sense, in that her parents were so absorbed with their own art, and so kind of focused on that there was no other exposure to anything else. And so to me, what it really points to is it's not so much about unschooling, it's about the parenting. and the other thing I think is important about her story is that I think there's a lesson in there, in that if we're unschooling parents, then it's really important that we try to expose our kids to as many different things as possible, even if they're things that we know nothing about.
Right.
Find the resources to help them explore something, or strewing. We talk about strewing and all of that stuff, just exposing them to lots of different things. And I think that message hopefully comes through in Rose's story, in that it was such a single focus that she feels that she was kind of what's the word? All these other experiences were left out.
Right.
And she feels like, well, maybe if she had been exposed to all these other things, that she might not be doing what she's doing.
Right.
And I think she has a little bit of resentment about that. But, I really, I think it was a very powerful story. And I also felt she was incredibly brave and bold to be able to accept that and take ownership of that and share the story with me. Which is why I included it. And then just purely from a sort of filmmaker perspective, I think it's really important to have a balanced film. One of the criticisms I got for Class Dismissed, actually, especially among general public members, not so much homeschooling or unschooling families, was, it's a totally biased film. It's completely biased and one-sided because you're saying that homeschooling is great and works for everybody. And
you said one family. This is what happened.
No, I know, but this is a criticism I got, and I got a lot of it. And so I started really thinking about that. And so with this film, I thought, well, it would be interesting to include one voice in there at least that has mixed feelings about it. Not necessarily, I don't consider her experience as negative.
Okay.
I consider it as sort of on the fence, because there were many times when she expressed to me that that really she had a fabulous childhood growing up, all this freedom, and she loved doing all this art and everything. But then as she got a little bit older, she realized, wow, it's really narrow, and I wish I'd been exposed to more. And so, I think that's a really important point and a really important message. So I just really wanted to include her story.
I think there's a couple of really great messages. I mean, like several. Like one of them in Rose's story, I think one of them is that sometimes as unschooling families we hear, oh, just live your life, just live. And but as unschooling parents, we have to do a little more than just live. We have to kind of support them and honor the kinds of things they might like to try. If I may like to just stay home and write a book. But they may like to go be in community theater. I mean, Katie did community theater. I didn't know the faintest thing about it.
Right.
And so we just plunged on in there. And, this is part of unschooling. And one of the reasons that unschooling is, when somebody says, oh, it's so easy, you just let them live. No, you have to support them. You have to figure out what's some resources, how to help them get the kinds of experiences they want.
Exactly.
And so, yeah,
and Rose's parents didn't really do that,
No, and I hate to criticize them, how.
No, I know, and she says, she doesn't really fault her parents for that. She understands that their primary goal and focus in life was their art, but
and they did have 8 children,
and they did have a very big family, and they didn't have a lot of money, and they were struggling to get by, and there's a lot of other underlying things going on in that family structure.
Yeah, and so the other part that I thought of is that lots of times it would be interesting to revisit Rose in 10 years.
Yes.
Because lots of times young adults who things aren't really going how they thought they might go, or they're not really happy with where they are right now in life, they look back and they think, what's the one weird thing about my life? That must be why everybody else has it figured out and I don't. So like in our case, interestingly, the kids didn't often think that it was unschooling that was their problem. They thought it was their military moving around stuff. So they have a couple times locked onto that as that's why I don't have these experiences. Well, life is full of that. And so it has to do with helping your kids. And maybe this is something too, to just learn as parents, to help learn ourselves and then help our children learn how to frame it, how life is choices. Rose could choose to be a chemist if she wants to be from here forward, that we can say, oh, this was my path for here. And now this is my chapter. And now I can do what I want with it. And some of those skills that I learned back then are really good.
Right. And she's starting to do that. At the end of the film, I kind of do a little sort of title card of like a little bit like where they are now.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
And so she's moving in a different direction now, and she's taking community college classes in Philadelphia, and she's moving into some new interests and discovering new things that she's passionate and interested about, which is great.
Yeah.
I just think, for her, I think that she feels that she wished she had some of that a little bit earlier. That she has time to sort of make up now, that she has to sort of backpedal and try to make up lost time a little bit.
That's why I think it'll be nice to talk to her at 35.
Yeah, I mean, again,
she'll have a full life. She'll be
I'm in touch with all of these people, obviously, and so I'll talk to her again. I'm sure at some point.
Well, that'd be interesting. That's what I want to do with my book. I want to go back to all those people. Where are you now? Did it go like you thought?
Exactly. I mean, does life go like any of us think?
Oh no!
Right? It comes back to that chain reaction thing again, right?
Oh
it's like
gosh,
one thing leads to another, and we never know where we're going to really end up.
That was interesting, because that was what somebody had said. I was going to show this to my family, but I feel like they'll lock on to the Rose story and they won't see the other. And I think that just all you can do is to talk to family members about where we are not a similar situation. I'm not engrossed in my art and barely, hand to mouth, and I have 8 kids. That's probably not most people's scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a pretty unique story. So, and everyone's story is going to be different too. And that's the thing. That's the great thing, as we know about unschooling, is that you can make it whatever it needs to be for your particular family and your particular children.
Right. David Martin just wrote, self-taught too, checking in with these same individuals 10 years from now. Thank you, David.
Oh gosh.
And Kathy said, I haven't watched the film yet, but I wonder how Rose would have fared in regular school. You know, that's always the thing.
That's a really, really good question, because there is a moment in her story where she says that she really wanted to try school, and they went. Her mother took her, and you know, they tested her, and
they had a bad
and
experience.
she had a horrible experience, and her mother said, "Right, that's it. We're not going, and we're done."
Yeah.
You know, and again, I feel like, you know, that's more of a, you know, a parenting thing rather than an unschooling thing. It's like, well, you know, maybe they should have had another crack at it. Maybe she should have had a bit of tutoring or something, you know, to try to make that a reality. Because I think that that's the important thing with unschooling, is that you support your kids in whatever ways you can. And like you said, you know, your kids were interested in theater arts and you knew nothing about that. Support them anyway. You make an effort to, like, okay, well, let's try to make this happen and see what I can do to help support this. And, you know, you don't know where it's going.
And I think it's hard. I think a lot of parents have a lot of leftover feelings from school, like getting called to the principal's office, and that idea of taking your kid and then your kid doesn't know their times tables, and you're like, oh man, you know, it's hard. It's hard. But and when she says, I wish I had had some tutoring or something, that's just from lack of knowledge. There's all kinds of other ways to get information, you know, especially now. Gosh, you could almost learn to do anything from YouTube.
But, you know, she didn't, they didn't have a computer in their family. So they had no access to anything. Really.
That's very hard. Yeah. Interesting. And the other thing about what Kathy's saying of how she would have fared in regular school, I think that we always have this idea of they would have done great in regular school, but maybe not. Maybe they would have been bullied, or maybe they would have been the poor kid in class, or maybe they would have been a variety of other things, and maybe school would not have been a great experience, because it's not a great experience for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, that's that my mom used to call it the what if game. What if it had been different? What if? You know, you can what if yourself to death.
Right.
So, interesting. Okay, let's see if there's any other on here. I'm only looking on the Unschooling Mom2Mom page. So if anybody has anything else, a question that's either happening in the group or happening on Jeremy's event that you made, I don't know whether it's, I don't know where all we're playing.
I'll have to open it up and have a quick look.
Look and see if that's there. Julie, if you or Katie could post on the page thread if there's another question. And I'll tell you about Jared, just because I got a little bias here. His family, they were friends of ours when we lived in California, and Jared was my son's age, and so they were friends. And some of those pictures of Jared carrying around those big old video cameras, man, I remember that. And what I also remember, which I think, you know, I remember, and Stacy, his mom's probably watching. Hi, Stacy. I remember thinking, man, we planned something, and next thing you know, Stacy says, no, Jared can't come. I'm like, what? Michael's looking forward to seeing him. But she was strong about guarding his space. And that was what he really talked about in the movie, was about how she protected that space, because it does take a long time to get the light and get all of that stuff and make your thoughts keep connecting. And if she had said, okay, time for birthday, gotta go.
Right.
And she didn't do that for him. And so it may have been what she wanted, but it wasn't what he needed. And so she prioritized his goals, you know, his interests. And I just, you know, at the moment I was miffed with you, Stacy, but but afterwards I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I adore that you were strong and able to see that not only did you carve out a separate, different way as an unschooling family, but even within the unschooling community, you still carved out another way, you know, that this is Jared's way. And I think that's a great example to everybody, that, you know, don't try to duplicate anybody else's thing. Just look at that child right there in front of you and then give them what they need. Go in that direction, right?
That's great. That's great,
So.
Sue. Great advice.
So, let's see. Look at your phone. That's what somebody just said. All right, what?
You're getting bombarded from all levels.
Says, hi, are there plans to show it at the HSC conference?
Yes, it is screening at the HSC conference on Friday night, which is going to be August. Let me see. Where am I? August August the 9th.
Okay.
6:30 p.m. at the HSC conference. It will be screening. Yes.
Okay. David Martin asks on the page, will there be some extended interviews that you provide like you did with Class Dismissed?
Yes, I can probably do that. I haven't really given that a huge amount of thought yet, but
I don't remember what that is. What is that?
Well, with Class Dismissed, what I did is I put out, all the various people that I interviewed in the film, the experts, so to speak. I obviously those were very edited in the film, but there was a lot more that didn't end up in the film. I released those as full interviews. So I could do that.
Okay.
I haven't really thought about it, but that's an idea.
Yeah. Once you wrap up one thing, everybody has a new plan.
Well, what about this? What about this?
Do this. All right.
Well, one thing I will say, which I think is interesting, like the way I structured this film is that each of the stories is a sort of standalone chapter with its own title, and I do at some point want to release them as individual standalone mini documentaries.
So you have a lot more story about them, and obviously tons of footage.
No, just as in the way that they are in the film. But they could be released as here's a 7-minute story about Jared, or here's a 7-minute story about I, or whatever. So just as another way to kind of get that information and the stories out, because to me, it's really, this film is all about the stories.
Right.
That's what I really
you remind me. You're doing this reminds me. Remember that guy? I can't even think what his name is because now he's older, like the rest of us. But he used to throw the dart in the phone book. Did you notice? He'd go to a town and he'd throw a dart. He'd open a phone book and he'd throw a dart, and then he'd call that number because he said everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
And he sounds fabulous. I think Steve something. I don't know what his name is, but I just adored that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, again, like I said, that was the real focus of this film. I wanted, I didn't want to have too many talking heads, expert people kind of talking. I really wanted to hear from the young adult unschoolers. It's their stories that I was trying to focus on, which is why I structured the film the way I did. It's very different than Class Dismissed.
My daughter watched some of it, and she watched Emily, the model and mechanic, and she said what she thought was interesting was in Emily's story, she was 14 and started dating a 17-year-old. And in a lot of the world, that is not seen as a good thing.
Right.
And a lot of, but she said what her take on it was, partly that's because when you're in school, you're taught to stay in your lane. Taught to not, 5th graders don't talk to 6th graders. 6th graders don't talk to 7th graders.
Age segregation. Yeah,
and so when you're in unschooling, you're with people based on interests.
Right.
And so why wouldn't some mechanic, some kid that loves mechanics that's a 17-year-old boy, why wouldn't he say, oh my God, she's gorgeous and she likes cars? When?
Right.
I think that that's way more real life. And that like as you get to be 28 and 32, it's not a big deal on what ages, all that difference is. But we're still so stuck in that.
Yeah.
From all that schooling and conditioning to believe that we should be like separated.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see, there's some more. Tulay wants to know, do you have more unschooling film ideas? What's next? Don't stop.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I'm glad you don't want me to stop.
There you go. See, that's how you need to hear it all. Not just them saying, work, Jeremy.
I do need a little bit of a rest, and I want to, stay in this moment with this film.
Sure.
Let it get it out there and so on. But yeah, I really don't know what's next.
Okay.
There's always ideas bubbling up in my head, you know, and I tell them to shut up. The ideas
I'm
won't
trying to
go
live in the
away.
moment, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, and sometimes the idea will not go away, and it just keeps coming up, and at that point, I know I have to do something about it.
Right.
So what happens?
Right. Okay. Let's see if there's. So, was there anything that was like your favorite part about doing the film?
Well, I did notice something interesting, and I didn't notice this until I was really deeply in the editing stage. As I was starting to really put it all together, I noticed that pretty much across the board, all of the people in the film said that the turning point for them was at around 13 or 14 years old.
Interesting.
And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. They all say that, you know.
That's
Emily's,
interesting because that age is the age that everybody comes to me and says, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do with them. Oh
that's
my
so
God,
fascinating,
they've
isn't it?
changed. They're not being little kids anymore. They used to do stuff with the family, and now they want to do their own thing, and I don't know what to do. And this looks all different. And
Right.
it's become really, really common that we're like, oh, 13, right?
Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting, and there must be something more to that.
Tied
There must be
together,
some sort of psychological thing, or you know,
Yeah.
hormonal thing, or something that's going on in there, and you know, in a young person's life at that point. But you know, Emily, you know, first got involved in cars around 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
I first realized he wanted to get into chemistry and go to college to study that at 14. You know, Jared made a documentary at 14. You know, I mean,
Right.
across the board, suddenly that was the moment where everything began to really click, and they really came into themselves and discovered who they were and what they really wanted to do.
That's so great because you know what? I always think of it as just live through it. Just live through 13 and 14. They'll come out on the other side and it'll be better. But maybe the opposite. Maybe we should say, no, this is the windows have been flung open. I don't know where they're going to go. Walk with them.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And even with my own daughter, you know, I mean, she around 13, 14, she's 14 now, has made it really clear that she wants to be a singer-songwriter. And as you know, has devoted a lot of time and energy into that in the last couple of years, and that's her primary driving force right now. Again, same age, right? So something clicked. I mean, she'd played around with it a little bit up until now, but now it's really serious. You know, she just put out an album.
I know, that's so incredible.
So I just thought that was really fascinating, and that didn't really occur to me in the process of interviewing everybody. That never really came up to me until I was editing, and then I suddenly realized, wow, they're all.
Because it was that way with Miro too, right? That he was just kind of along for the ride playing, and then it shifted for him.
Right.
And it became part of what he was bringing to the.
Right, and now he's leading his own groups. He's taken on the mantle of running Project Rock School with his own thing at the same age. You know, so there's something very intriguing about that. I think something really important that we need to look at as parents.
That's so great because I haven't really thought of that age from that perspective.
Yeah.
Great. So Becky Tucker says thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. And so as far as like hard things, was there anything particularly difficult about doing this particular, you know, to me it looks like Class Dismissed. The hard thing was the roller coaster you were on of, oh my gosh, how are they going to end up?
What's going to happen
in the end? Oh my gosh, all these years I poured into it.
I know.
What was the hard thing with this one?
I think the hardest thing, well, I mean, making any film is really hard.
Grueling.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult filmmaking really is.
Yeah.
It's an enormous undertaking on so many levels. So, you know, again, with this film, as with Class Dismissed, there were moments where I was just pulling my hair out going, what have I done? You know, what do I have? What is this? I don't understand it. I don't know what the stories are. It's not clear to me. It's a mess. I'm never going to get through it. You know, and all of just the struggle of the process of the creative process, really.
Right.
And there wasn't one particular area that felt harder than anything else. It's just an ongoing creative process. You start with
trying to live your life in the middle.
Yeah, exactly, and trying to juggle it with being a dad and working and being a father and all this other stuff. So, you know, that was really hard. There wasn't one specific moment though of making a particular film that was more grueling or harder than anything else. It's just a process.
Mhm.
But I've been doing it long enough that I understand that I think with any creative endeavor, you're going to go through those periods where you're just hitting a wall creatively. It's not coming together. You want to abandon the whole thing and go hide in a corner, and
Like,
then
I've
you
just
just
blown
keep
the family savings.
exactly, and you just keep pushing through and pushing through, and then and that's what I love about the process of filmmaking. You get those moments where clarity, where it just suddenly comes together, and you're like, oh, that's fabulous, that's so great, and then it pushes you to the next moment,
Right.
and that's the journey of any creative process, whether it's writing a book or painting a painting or sculpting or anything, any creative endeavor, I think goes through that kind of roller coaster.
Mhm.
So,
So,
yeah.
so any words of wisdom for parents that are maybe they're just starting and their kid is like not finding their way, or they have been stuck in school this time and they've never really been allowed to find their way.
Yeah, I mean that's a big one. I think for me, and I've been asked this question so many times too,
Yeah, yeah,
is it always comes down to trust, but it's trust on both sides of the equation.
Mhm.
Trust, an absolute implicit trust in your children that they will do what's right for them, but also trust in yourself that you can step back enough to allow that to happen.
right.
Because I think that one of the things that I know I've dealt with, and my wife Kim has dealt with, is there's moments of doubt that come up from our previous conditioning,
Oh,
from
yeah,
our parents, from our schooling, from the way we were raised, that says, what what are you doing? This is like, you're messing this kid up. You're doing the
yeah,
wrong thing.
yeah.
She should do this, or they should do that. And those voices come in, and that's the hardest part, is letting that go and trusting that deeper down in your heart, you feel differently. Those are just voices from conditioning.
Right.
But deep down, I think we all want the same thing for our children. We want them, to be the most complete and whole, self-loving,
Happy.
happy human beings that we can create, right? So, or help support. And so I think that, so the trust is sort of a twofold thing. There's trusting ourselves that we go, okay, when those voices come up, trust that, oh, that's old voice conditioning. Trust that if I put that aside, I'm going to listen to my heart and come from that place. And then the other part is trust the children that they're going to actually follow through and bloom into who they're supposed to be, if we just allow that process to unfold. And I think trust is a really difficult thing for people to get their
It
heads around.
is. It's hard to do. And sometimes you think, oh gosh, I got laundry, I got groceries, I got to clean up the dog do in the backyard. I got so much going on. I don't have time to think about that.
Right.
But if you don't work on your own trust, then your kids are going to sense it.
Right.
Their kids are going to sense that you don't really have full faith in them.
Right.
And that's why it matters, right? That's
Right.
why it's hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And for everybody to know that there's no end, there's no finish line. That we just you can shift and how many careers have we all had over a lifetime? And
yeah, it's an ongoing process of evolution. We're always evolving as people, and we learn new things, and it changes our perceptions, and then something else comes along and replaces that, and we just have to flow. I think flow is the other part of it. Just being really willing to flow, to trust life, to trust the process of living and learning, and allow the world in. And rather than build barriers around things, well, that's no good, can't do that, that's not this, that's not, rather than do that, just allow all of it. Just keep making your container bigger and bigger.
Right. And not get swept up with that, going out, if I do this, then this could turn into this, and this could turn into this, and this, and then you get all this negative spiraling, and you have them living under a bridge somewhere.
Right.
And, that was a long stretch. There's a lot of steps between where you are now and that bridge.
Right.
And and at any point they could change their mind and decide to do something else. So, and I love that you had said earlier, that whole thing, I always believe that one thing really does lead to another. And we don't get to see what it is when you're in the throes of it, right? You're like,
life is just this unbelievable series of unfolding events, and some of them are good, some of them are not so good, some of them are in between. But,
and even the not so good helps edit where you're.
even those are really valuable life lessons, and again, I always like to think of it as a container. We have this. I think when we're born, we have this gigantic container that contains like the whole universe. And then school starts, and the container gets really small, and by the time we're adults, it's really tiny, and everything else out here doesn't exist. And
we're afraid.
Yeah, and my philosophy in life that I try to remind myself to do all the time is to look at where my container is small and make it bigger, and just make it a little bit bigger. Allow this in. I don't agree with this. That's okay. Allow it in. Maybe it's going to teach me something. These people are saying something that I really am offended by. Well, allow it in and see what that does. Like, try to keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger, and life becomes so much more rich.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what unschooling is, in a way.
I think it's exactly what unschooling
allowing
is.
all of that to just to flow with it. Just allow the container to get bigger and move within it freely.
Yeah.
That's kind of my own personal little...
See, we did get to the philosophy of life. I knew we would get there.
That's my own little pep talk that I give myself. When my container starts getting small, I go, wait, no, open it up.
Right. Well, because then we get used to it being small and we're afraid. We think, what will happen if I leave this container?
Right.
And will I drift in a gravity-free...
and maybe drifting's okay for a while.
Maybe. Right. Well,
what's wrong with drifting?
What's wrong? Yeah, exactly. And I think that we're so, what is that called? We want things we want to see the plan, do the plan. we don't want to just kind of like wing it for a little while and see what naturally presents itself.
Right. We're afraid of that. Right.
Yeah.
We've been conditioned to be afraid of that.
We have, because I don't think we start out afraid of it.
No.
I look at my little grandson, and he's not afraid of anything.
Uh-huh.
And he says, "Let's try it."
Right.
And he's never been in a school. Biggest foolish experience. He's had little gym for 45 minutes once a week. And I think that you're 100% right. They get conditioned. We all have gotten conditioned to be afraid, and but when we realize that we can make changes all along the way, and that life is full of all kinds of choices, and listen to it, and that's the other thing that sometimes people think, oh well, in unschooling they're only going to hear their own family's perspective. No, not really.
Not really.
A lot of other perspectives if you believe the concept of let it in, let's talk about it. Where do we fall with that? My kids and we don't have the same beliefs on all kinds of things. That's okay.
Absolutely.
I was not trying to create a little mini me. Lord knows we don't need that.
Yeah, I certainly don't need a mini me of me either. So.
No. So anyway. Well, Jeremy, we could just go on and on, couldn't we?
We could. So this is so great.
Well, thanks so much for doing this with us.
You're very welcome. Are there any last questions there that have popped up?
Well, she just said, will the video be available later? And it'll be available immediately.
Great, yeah. And I'll post it too on my site and everything and make sure it's out there.
Because I'll have it as a Zoom recording that we can share it like that too.
Yeah.
And our technology, it looks like, held out.
It works. Wow, we're so cutting edge. It's
we
fantastic.
are. Oh my gosh, we impress ourselves so much.
And I just want to say to you, Sue, I am so incredibly grateful to you and to Unschooling Mom2Mom for everything that you do. Like every day you're on this, every day. And I think Unschooling Mom2Mom is probably the single most important resource out there right now.
Oh, that's very nice.
I really mean that. It's like I'm just so blown away by the incredible effort and love and care that you put into what you're doing. And helping so many people. So thank you.
Well, everyone is welcome. I'm just so happy to have a place to be able to do that. I didn't want to my kids grew up and then,
yeah, well, I'm not.
I got all this information. What am I
now?
So I'm like one of those people that remodels the house and then I add on a room and I add on a room. I'm like, oh shoot, no hallway. You got to go through this room to get to, and so sometimes I appreciate everybody's patience when they can't find the stuff I've made. But it was really important to build a place where people could see that they have an option, that school is not the only option, and that they're going to have to reframe a few things in their head.
Right.
But if they can get there, they can have a way happier life.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
All
great.
right. Well, Jeremy, thanks
Thank
again.
you.
I think that was unless anybody says there are, oh man, I have a teenager right now and trust is so hard. That's Cheryl Schmidt. The mirage of the finish line is so strong. It
Yeah.
is a mirage, my dear. It is a mirage.
And yeah, thank you to everyone who jumped on live. I wasn't able to kind of keep track of what was happening there.
Yeah, we were. I think we got most of the actual questions.
Yeah, and I'm sure once we post this, there'll be other questions, and I encourage people to drop questions.
Yeah, go ahead and ask because Jeremy's around.
I'm around. I can respond.
I'll answer. And let's see. Do you have just checking my last couple places where people have been sending questions. I think we got it. All right, Jeremy, thank you again. Thank everybody for joining us, and have a great week.
Have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.